Hi, this is Mrs. Ziegler, and I'm going to go over completing your velocity and acceleration lab. So last class we collected data. So remember, for your lab, we timed how fast the car moved at the half-meter mark and then the meter mark, depending on what the lab designated that we needed to do. So remember, there were times in which you chose the number of books. So you either had one book, you had 3 books, you had 4 books, you had at most 4 books. When you are writing your times, remember, you looked at your timer and then you must write your time in this notation, not what it says on the timer. If you do not do that, you're going to get points taken off. So you also need to remember that you need to show your work, and you have to have units on everything that you've written in terms of data that you collected. Okay, so remember, for your charts, the first and the last chart, you were the one who picked the number of books. All right, so for our lab, remember that you first collected your time. So when you collected your time, it looked like this. So it looked like this. So you had your time collected here. Okay, so now you are going to calculate your speed. Well, first question you're asking me is, how do I calculate speed? Well, that is what your quiz on Friday is. So therefore, you need to know how to calculate speed. Speed and velocity is how fast an object moves. Remember, speed and velocity are the same formula. So the formula for it is S or V, depending on which one you want to use, but they literally mean the same thing. It is distance over time. Remember, the only difference between speed and velocity is that speed is a scalar and velocity is a vector. Well, what's scalar and vector? Look at your vocab words. The difference between the two is only one word, which stands for the letter D. That word is what velocity is, the difference from speed. Okay, so we're going to, before I go through this, let's look at our data. So remember, when you're calculating speed, again, you are going to use distance. Well, do I have distance? Well, right here, I have distance, right? So you have distance, and then you have, whoops, it's out of focus, and then you have time. Okay, so this is your time. So to show your work, it is distance is divided by time is 1 meter divided by 0.83 seconds. Okay, so in your calculator, remember, you'll do 1 divided by 0.83. So you got all those numbers. Again, I don't want you writing all those numbers. You're going to round. So you're going to round to at least the second decimal. So here, then it's 1.20, and since I have meters divided by seconds, my units for speed is meters per second. So that is how you calculate all of your, I apologize for the refocusing, but you are going to take your distance that you're given divided by the time that you collected. All right, so now here you need to make sure that after you do your calculations that you answer all your lab questions. Okay, so now I know a lot of students don't remember because they don't listen. They don't remember what is an independent variable and what is a dependent variable. Okay, so independent variable, remember, is the variable that you change. Well, think about what you did. Look at your chart. What was the one thing that you changed? Okay, the dependent variable, that is the variable that changes because of what you changed. So think about when you change something in your data collection, what changed because of what you did. Okay, so that is how you're going to answer those 2 questions. All right, so looking here, it's asking you, velocity. What is the one word that describes the difference between speed and velocity? Well, as I said before, it's one word, starts with a D, and because remember, speed and velocity are the same thing except for one thing. Here's another hint. Velocity is a vector, and speed is a scalar. So look up vector and scalar to know the difference between those two, because that is the difference between speed and velocity. All right, so now we're going to do, or I'm going to talk about these calculations. So we know that once you have collected your time, okay, you are going to calculate your velocity, and after you do that, then you are going to calculate your acceleration. So I'm going to do a quick review as to how to do some of these things that you should already know. So again, here I have my time. So here's my distance, right? So distance divided by time is how I get velocity. So I do 0.5 meters divided by 0.42 seconds. Okay, again, I'm showing my work. So taking my calculator, I do 0.5 divided by 0.42. So that is 1.19 meters per second. Okay, so same thing here. 0.5 meters divided by 0.40 seconds. Again, 0.5 divided by 0.4, that's 1.25 meters per second. I've got 0.5 meters divided by 0.45 seconds. 0.5 divided by 0.45, which is 1.11 meters per second. Okay, so now it says average time and velocity. So remember, how do I calculate averages? To calculate averages, I'm going to add this all up. Okay, so once I add it all up, it's 0.42 plus 0.4 plus 0.45. Okay, then I'm going to take this and I divide by 3 because I have 3 trials. So this is 0.42 seconds is my average. Okay, same thing for this one. I'm going to add this up. So it's 1.19 plus 1.25 plus 1.11. That's 355. I have 3 of them. Divide by 3 and I get 1.18 meters per second. Again, this is my average. Remember that for acceleration, it is final velocity minus initial velocity divided by time. Well, remember that my initial velocity is 0 because it was at rest. So it's 118 meters per second minus 0 meters per second divided by the time, which is 0.42 seconds. Okay, so it's this divided by this. So it's 118 divided by 0.42. So my acceleration is 2.81 meters per second. Or I could do meters per second squared, whichever one you want. Okay, so again, this is how you calculate your acceleration and how you calculate averages. So if we look at the next grouping, same thing. I'm going to add these up, and then I'm going to divide by 3 to get me this answer. Once I calculate this, which is distance over time, which is again 1 meter divided by 0.83 seconds, my units would be meters per second. I'm going to add up all this, and then once I get the answer, I'm going to divide by 3 to get me this answer. Then I'm going to take this velocity divided by time, because again, acceleration is final velocity minus initial velocity to calculate my acceleration. So now we're going to look at, so now looking at here, we're going to calculate our acceleration. Okay, so here's my examples. So again, these are my number of books that I use. This is the time that I calculated. So again, sorry, again about the focusing. All right, so velocity is again equal to distance over time, which is 1 meter divided by 0.95 seconds. Okay, so again, that is 1 divided by 0.95, which is 1.05 meters per second. To get acceleration, it is acceleration v final, which is minus 0 because it was meters per second divided by time. So I'm going to take this and then divide by this time. Okay, and then it'll be 1.05 divided by 0.95, and so my acceleration is 1.11 meters per second squared. And that's what you're going to do for each one, is take distance divided by time. So here you can see, here's my distance divided by time. Then once I get this answer, which again the units are meters per second, I'm going to take this divided by this to get me my acceleration. Okay, so you should be able to, because I just stepped through how to complete this lab. If you have any questions, please reach out.